Hey there, I get it when you're looking at a high-end mobile workstation like the HP ZBook Studio G10. The biggest worry is whether you're dropping a lot of cash on something that ends up gathering dust on a shelf. You've probably seen a dozen specs on the page, but you're still unsure if it actually fits the way you work, whether it can handle the kinds of files you juggle day to day, and if the price tag translates into real productivity gains instead of just a shiny badge. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's dig into the practical side of this machine so you can decide if it's the right fit for your workflow or if you should keep looking. First off, the ZBook Studio G10 is built around a 13th Gen Intel Core i9-13900H. That chip is a powerhouse on paper, 14 cores with a mix of performance and efficiency cores, so it promises to chew through demanding workloads without breaking a sweat. In reality, that translates to being able to keep a full suite of design software open at once. Think Adobe Photoshop, Illustrator, and After Effects side by side, while also pulling in a 3D viewport from Blender or AutoCAD. I ran a quick test on my own setup, opening a 12-layer Photoshop file, a 4-minute After Effects composition, and a high-poly 3D model. The system stayed responsive, swapping between apps in a matter of seconds. If your day includes switching between multiple heavy programs, that kind of multitasking muscle is where the ZBook really shows its value. Memory is another big selling point, 32 GB of DDR5 RAM. For most creative pros, that amount of RAM is more than enough to keep things fluid. I've seen people with 64 GB on paper, but they rarely fill that capacity unless they're rendering massive video sequences or running large datasets. With 32 GB, you can comfortably keep a 10-track video edit open, apply color grading, and still have room for background processes like asset libraries or cloud sync without the dreaded lag spikes. If you're a photographer who works with RAW files in the 50-megapixel range, you'll notice the smoothness when loading full-resolution images and applying IBIS enhancements. The downside? If you're planning to run heavy virtual machines or large-scale scientific simulations, you might feel the pinch and need to upgrade down the line. Storage is a solid 1 TB SSD, which serves as both the operating system drive and a workspace for large media libraries. The SSD's speed means loading a 100 GB video project is a matter of seconds, not minutes. For people who keep their raw footage locally rather than relying on external drives, that space can make a huge difference. On the flip side, the 1 TB capacity will fill up quickly if you routinely store 4K video clips or massive 3D textures. You'll either need an external enclosure or a cloud backup plan, and that's an extra cost you should factor in. Now, let's talk about the display. The 16-inch screen sits at 1920x1200, so it's not a 4K panel, but the extra vertical pixels over a classic 1080p laptop give you a bit more real estate for timelines and toolbars. In practice, the extra 200 lines feel nice when you're editing video. You get a little more preview height without needing to scroll constantly. The colors are fairly accurate out of the box, which is a blessing for photo editors who prefer to avoid spending hours calibrating. However, if you're a colorist who needs an industry-grade DCI-P3 coverage, you'll likely want an external monitor. The screen's brightness peaks around 350 nits, decent for indoor work but not ideal for bright office environments where sunlight can wash out the image. Graphics are handled by Intel Iris Xe with a 12 GB shared memory pool. That's a step up from typical integrated graphics, and it does a respectable job with moderate 3D workloads. I rendered a simple 60-frame animation in Blender using the built-in renderer, and the frame times were comparable to an older mid-range dedicated GPU. For heavy game development or complex ray-traced visualizations, you'll still feel the limitations. In short, if your work is graphics-intensive but not GPU-bound, the Iris Xe will keep you moving. If you need raw raster power for things like real-time rendering, you'll want a workstation that ships with an NVIDIA RTX card. Battery life is a common concern for any laptop you plan to take on the road. The ZBook Studio G10 packs a 90Wh battery, which under light office tasks, email, web browsing, word processing will stretch to about 8 hours. When you fire up Photoshop or start a draft render, that drops to around 4 to 5 hours. That's pretty standard for a workstation of this class, but it means you'll need a power outlet for any prolonged creative sessions. If you're a digital nomad who expects to work unplugged for entire days, you might want to consider a model with a larger battery or a secondary power bank solution. One aspect that often gets overlooked is the port selection. The ZBook Studio G10 gives you a decent mix: 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports, an HDMI 2.1 output, a full-size SD